So let's talk about chemistry. In the lab of language, there are lots of recipes to use when concocting new words. Want to verbify that old noun you've got lying around? Just stick on an IFY and you're good to go. Looking to add a bit of concreteness to your adjectives, all you've got to do is toss a little ness in there. But what happens when we've used up all our ingredients and still haven't managed to cook up what we need? When all we've got left are full-fledged words, which formula will fit? I'm O.T. Lieberman and this is the Ling Space.
Herzlich willkommen.
Welcome to the Ling Space.
One surefire way to build a new word is to take a simpler, smaller one as your root and then tack on a suffix. So a verb like evaporate becomes the noun evaporation, while the noun crystal can crystallize into a verb. As we touched on in a previous episode, this kind of process is known as derivation, and its defining characteristic is that every new addition to the word not only makes it longer, but also switches up its category, adding a dash of meaning along the way. Because these kinds of affixes produce new words in systematic and predictable ways, we say they're productive. And that applies just as well to words you've never seen before. Like, even if you didn't know what iodine was, you could make a pretty good guess that iodizing something means adding whatever iodine is to it. It's a pretty reliable strategy. But other productive word-making methods exist, besides sticking a bunch of little bits at the ends. One especially convenient way to do this is by taking two or more roots and then gluing them together. In other words, we can create compounds. Take a phrase like bathtub leak. You might think of it as just another chunk of a sentence, and in a way, you'd be right. After all, every sentence can be broken up into its constituent parts, with each potentially being made up of multiple words. But in another way, this phrase is really its own thing. For one, its stress pattern is different from your typical noun phrase. While the adjective-noun pair leaky bathtub definitely has two clear standout syllables at the beginning of each word, bathtub leak really only has one at the very beginning. Even though it's got three roots which can all stand on their own in the right context, the pronunciation suggests they formed a tight-knit trio. And this prosodic tell is actually really useful. When words bond together to become a compound, they get treated differently than when they're floating around on their own. That's how you know when I talk about a black board, I mean a piece of wood that's been painted black. But when I say blackboard, you know it's something I can write on in a classroom, and it's actually probably green most of the time. That's our other big clue that we've got a compound on our hands. Even though its meaning is obviously related to its parts, the relationship's a lot more loose than what you'd find in your average noun phrase. So while our leaky bathtub from before really only has one definition, bathtub leak can be used to mean a bunch of different things. Like, it could be a leak coming from the tub, for sure, but could also be a leak right over your bathtub. Or there could be a leaky stain in your ceiling and it just happens to be kind of shaped like a tub. Or the top secret plans for a brand new kind of bathtub have been leaked to the public. You've got to get more and more creative as you go, but there is no real upper limit. And some of the more common compounds in English are even less connected to their parts. Like, a greenhouse is sort of a house, but it definitely doesn't have to be green. And a bird brain is neither a bird nor a brain in any literal sense. If you're still not sure you're dealing with a compound, just try modifying part of it, pointing something at just that one bit. Since a compound word is really a complete unit, trying to attach something to only a piece of it won't really work. So while you can pick some berries and mix in some blue to make blueberries, adding in an adverb and calling them very blueberries sounds strange, even if they are very blue. Phrases like very blue car or very blue book are fine, because in those, blue is a separate word, so that very can easily latch onto it. But blueberry is a compound, so once it's been put together, you can't really get at that blue part anymore. Now, compounds come in all shapes and sizes. We can combine a preposition and a noun to make an overdose, a verb and a noun to make a swear word, or we can hook up two live adjectives and make things white hot. But while languages differ in how much compounding they'll allow, one of the most productive types of compounding in Germanic languages, like English and German, is noun-noun compounding. In English, we can pretty much slap any two nouns together and get something useful out of it. We've already got compounds like airplane crash, or breakfast cereal, or bathtub leak from before, but I can just as easily say roof pizza, or chicken brothers, and you've probably already got an image in your head of what those mean. These kinds of noun piles are so useful that they can often be found in headlines, and routinely lead to pretty ridiculous results, including Brighton cockroach curry house fine, and Fishfoot spa virus bombshell. And if you think English has big compounds, German is especially notorious for how many nouns it can cram into a single word. Take this infamous compound, which gets roughly translated as Danube Steamship Driving Company Captain Cabin Door Key. German kind of lets you noun up whatever you want. Now, all these compounds, even the really big ones, aren't just flat strings of words. Just like we were able to draw word structure trees for their derivationally complex cousins in a previous episode, we can also group the pieces of compounds together in meaningful ways. For instance, shorter words like high school or headstrong look like this, where you can see the categories of each word and the category of the whole thing at the very top. The structure for bathtub leak is more involved, with bath and tub getting together first, so they form a semantic unit. After all, the word refers more to a kind of leak related to bathtubs in some way, and not so much to a tub leak related to baths, whatever that might mean. Of course, the branches in our trees can swing in either direction, depending on what we're trying to say. So a compound like organic chemistry teacher can refer to someone who teaches organic chemistry, but also to someone who teaches plain old chemistry, and they just happen to be organic and not like a robot. The structure of each word then reflects the meaning that we get out of it. And while with derivational morphology, the last prefix or suffix to attach to a word is what usually gets to determine the category of the overall result, the category of an English compound always matches up with the part that's furthest to the right. That's because English compounds, along with compounds in many other languages, are right-headed. That's why blueberries are nouns like berries and not adjectives like blue. German is right-headed too, and it has grammatical gender, which means that super long word from before ends up being masculine entirely because that word at the end is. Finally, compound nouns can help us better understand what speakers pay attention to when they form new words. If you remember back to when we talked about theta rules, we said that verbs come packaged with a kind of list of everything they need to form a complete sentence, like an agent to do things, or a location for something to happen. And then a rule like the theta criterion makes sure that the verb gets the right things to fill those roles. As it turns out, this list can actually hang around, even when the verb gets turned into a noun. Let's check this with derivation first. The word manage usually needs an agent to do the managing and a theme to be managed, like when we build the sentence, Walter managed the problem. But if we throw in a ment, giving us management, we can tap into those same relationships and build a noun phrase around it instead. If we just make Walter possessive and put the problem inside a prepositional phrase, we get Walter's management of the problem, with that possessor and prepositional phrase filling the role of agent and theme respectively. So it looks like nouns can inherit the theta rules of the verbs they're derived from, which suggests speakers have at least some knowledge of how word formation affects these roles. In the case of a suffix like ment, there doesn't seem to be much of a change at all. The theta rules just kind of stick around. But we can know for sure that we pay attention to these relationships by considering compounds. The kinds of compounds we've looked at so far tend to smush a couple of words together without there being any real deep connection between them. But there's another way we can do it. If we take the problem from out of our noun phrase and put it in front of management, forming the compound problem management, we still end up interpreting problem as the theme. In fact, even if we put something else there in its place that could potentially act like an agent, say the word people, we get people management. That sounds like it's about people being managed, and not about people doing any managing. It looks themey, not agent-like. So it looks like when we're doing this other kind of compounding, we sort of use up the original verb's theme. And if that's what's really happening, we should see the effect when we try to build a phrase around it like we did before. And sure enough, we can't really say something like, Walter's problem management of the problem. It just gets really redundant, like there's two different themes in there, so that our noun phrase gets too crowded. Because theta rules matter so much when we build what we're going to say, we have to keep track of which ones go where when we're forging new words. So whether you're mixing up a batch of new words or running experiments on the elements of language, when you're playing with the chemistry of compounds, the blue sky is the limit. So we've reached the end of the Ling space for this week. If you figured out the formula, you learned that compounding gives us a productive way to expand our vocabulary by sticking whole words together. That it's a different process from building full sentences with its own stress patterns and semantic rules. That compound words have their own structures related to their meaning, just like other words do. And that we can use them to explore what changes and what stays the same when we make up new words. The Ling Space is produced by me, Moti Lieberman, and directed by Denise Prévost. This week's episode was written by Stéphane Herdegues. Our editor is Georges Coulombe, our music is by Shane Turner, and our graphics team is Atelier Muse. We're down in the comments below, or you can bring the discussion back over to our website where we'll have some extra material on this topic. Check us out on Tumblr, Twitter, and Facebook, and try dropping by our store. And if you want to keep expanding your own personal Ling space, please subscribe. And we'll see you in 2 weeks. どうぞバテンや